Hello everybody and welcome back to Minecraft in our Talking About Redstone world. And today we're going to talk about a few more things, including some methods to send vertical redstone signals and some common survival farms and how they work, as well as some differences between how these work in Java versus Bedrock. So we will be hopping between this world and a Bedrock world for some explanation. As you just saw, if you happen to catch that, this is just a little sugarcane farm. We've got a chunk of mud with some water next to it. We've got our sugarcane growing. And when our observer observes the sugarcane grow in front of it, the piston activates. And this will just run infinitely. Because this is a mud block, the hopper below is able to pick up the items and output them here. Here is the same thing, but with bamboo, which when it grows in front of that observer, this piston down here is activated. And we're sending that signal down with this wall section. So when this trapdoor flips, it turns every wall below it into a wall column. And it's worth noting, well, we'll cover it in a minute, but in Java, that's instant. In Bedrock, there is actually a single tick of delay for each downward piece. But again, we'll show that off in just a minute. These are both exactly the same in Java and Bedrock, and we'll take a look at these same builds working in Bedrock in just a minute, as well as this chicken farm, which there are a few key differences between Java and Bedrock, so let's talk about it in Java real quick. So, in Java, we have a group of chickens, which I have silenced with the data pack just so that it makes a little less noise, standing on top of a hopper into a dispenser. We're using our favorite little dispenser clock here, set to a 3-tick delay just to slow it down a little bit. And it will collect eggs, and every time eggs go in here, it will dispense them out into this half slab. The baby chickens will kind of chill out here under the cauldron, and that cauldron is full of lava. Oop, and I've let our chickens out. Anyways, get out of here. So, when the baby chickens grow up, they grow into the hitbox of our lava cauldron. They die, they get cooked. We have item filters underneath that are filtering cooked chicken to here and feathers to here. And then we just have a dispenser, which I haven't hooked up, that just kind of dispenses into lava as a garbage receptacle for anything else that went through. You could also just put a chest so that if anything goes through the system that's not supposed to, or if you overflow and happen to fill all of your storage, it'll just go into a in bulk storage. Come on, off my platform. Anyways, let's take a... Oh, and one more farm before we go. This is a sheep farm. What we have is an observer pointing into a dirt block underneath the sheep. The grass along the sides here will eventually grow up onto that grass block, and the sheep will be able to eat the grass. And when they do, the hopper minecart that we've placed inside of that block will pick up the wool, pass it through the system, and the wool will collect here. And to put a hopper minecart inside of a block, in Java and Bedrock it's slightly different the way it behaves, but basically you're going to take a... Oop. Hold on. Get out of here. We're going to take a... Wow, the word vanished from my head. A piston and a block. We're going to power that piston. And just like that, we now have... Oh, it passed through. Hold on. I did something silly there. We need to have a block back there. All of that work to prepare, and I still messed it up. Anyways, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. We're going to break the rail underneath. We're going to set that right there. A block right there. We're going to do that. And just like that, we have a hopper minecart inside of a block, which is what allows us to collect the items from this farm. So, with those covered, let's see how those compare to the Bedrock counterparts. So, I will see you in just a moment. Alright guys, let's talk about some of these farms in Bedrock. So, our sugarcane works exactly the same. It gets broken, gets picked up by the hopper through the mud block, and gets passed into storage here. Lose a little bit just because I have the side of this open, but passes through the system just fine. With our bamboo, it also works exactly the same. So let's do that real quick and grab that. So we can show this off. And if I do that, you'll see it also activates. It also allows the items to pass through the mud and into storage. Now, the key difference that we talked about before is we get a single tick of delay for each downward block. So this activates a little bit more slowly, but other than that, it is the same. These are version agnostic, work the same in both versions. Our chicken farm, we do have to modify. So our baby chickens, when they grow up into a cauldron full of lava in Bedrock, do not take damage. So the way that we are going to modify to account for that is by using a dispenser with a lava bucket to create that little lava blade you're seeing. And what I'm doing here is we have a comparator circuit here, and what this is doing is every time this receives a signal, it's getting it from this repeater. This is a signal strength of 15. So we go to 15, 14, we pass a 14 through here, this remains a 14. So we get a slow decay clock, is what it's sometimes called. And whenever this decay clock activates, we're activating that repeater twice. How are we doing, or that dispenser twice? How are we doing that? We take a 1-tick pulse here, and we're going to run it into these two repeaters next to each other. This one is at a 1-tick delay, and this one is at a 3-tick delay. And they both run into the block above this dispenser. So once this activates, we get a 1-tick activation, and then a tick later, we get a 3-tick activation. Just like that. Which allows us to dispense and then retract that lava. Now, why do we have this little circuit here? Well, let's grab some eggs. And if I put more than one egg in here, what this is going to do is this will prevent this system from activating every time. It will activate once when this initially turns on, and once again when it turns off. So that allows us to prevent this system from accidentally overactivating and leaving the lava out for some reason. It's just a little bit of a buffer control. Other than that, our items filters work the same. We get our cooked chicken into one and our feathers into the other, and in this case we're just using a chest to catch anything that either overflows or that isn't supposed to go through. But for the most part, this is the same, other than the key difference of not being able to use a cauldron, so we have to use our dispenser activator instead. What about our sheep farm? We have our observer like normal. We have a redstone cross here activating a dispenser. This is exactly the same as Java. In fact, this entire thing is exactly the same as Java. But there is a key difference that we need to note, which is that when you are making this, where are my... There we go. Pistons, there is a very slight difference in the way we have to put this together. And that's because if I put this hopper minecart here, and then I stack this up the same way we would in Java, when I do this, this block does not have our hopper minecart in it. This block does. It pushes it back 1. So you have to prepare for that and know that instead of building it on this block, you have to start it 1 back. So you should have a hopper underneath here to pick up from the hopper minecart. And the other key difference is we need to protect the sides. And the reason for that is entities can bump this minecart through the block. And that's you, that's other mobs, that's anything. And that can make the system offset and prevent you from being able to keep in place. So the easy way to fix that is to just put blocks next to it so that it cannot be nudged anywhere. That said, that's really the only difference on this. You can build this farm exactly the same with just the caveat that you have to handle the hopper minecart differently. And the reason that we have to use the hopper minecart inside of a block is because we can't use a mud block here because it has to be grass for our sheepy friend to be able to eat and shed their wool. So, with that said, let's hop back over to the Java side and continue looking at a few other things. Alright, welcome back. So, we've talked about sugarcane, bamboo, chicken, and sheep, as well as the slight caveat in putting items in a hopper minecart, and the note about them being nudged out, as you can see, doesn't apply the same way here in Java. That's really something that you need to pay more attention to in Bedrock. I can't really nudge that out because the hitboxes are a little different. So, we know that we can pass a signal downwards with trapdoors. However, you cannot pass that same signal upwards. It will only ever travel down. And that's because when you do this, it makes this wall and any walls below it into column walls. But any walls above it, as you can see from the side here, remain regular walls. So, what if you want to pass a signal upwards? Well, there's several ways we can do it, and some caveats for those several ways. One of the ways we can do it is with leaf stone, which, as you can see, sends about 5 or 6 blocks upwards. It's not super far, and there's a tick of delay for each space up it goes. And this does not work at all in Bedrock. In Bedrock Edition, leaves do not get a block state update when you put a log below them. So flat out, this version does not work. What does work is our scaffolding, which we talked about last time. And there is a single tick of delay for each space it moves up, but as you can see, it goes and goes and goes. And this works exactly the same as in Bedrock, and we'll look at that in a minute. But it will travel as high as you want it to go with a single tick of delay. What if you want a signal to go a little bit faster than that, though? Well, you can use half slabs staggered across, which will allow a signal to move up, but importantly, will not allow a signal to move down. I'll show you that right now real quick. If I put a lever here, you can see this activates, but this does not. Signal will not travel downwards on half slabs, but it will travel up. So if I activate this, you can see with 2 ticks of delay, that lamp turns on and turns off about as fast as we can look up. And that's because the only delay we're getting is once we hit the point of a signal strength of 15, we're inverting the signal with a torch, and then continuing the tower up, and at the end we invert it again so it's in the same state as our lever. So for every roughly 15 feet of vertical, or 15 blocks, I'm sorry, of vertical travel, you're going to gain about 1 tick of delay. Another surprisingly fast method that we didn't talk about last time is using a block swapper, which this is a pretty simple block swapper. I'll show you how to build this in just a moment. But if we swap a soul sand block under a water column, you'll see we get a almost instant, maybe 1 tick of delay response all the way to the top. And a slightly delayed, maybe 3 or 4 tick delay all the way to the top. And these all turn on and off at the same time. And because this is a water column, you can carry this infinitely upwards until you hit build limit. And you'll always get that very fast on and that slightly delayed off. So this is a surprisingly effective method, and all we're doing is pointing an observer at this water column, and it's detecting when the bubbles appear in the column and when the bubbles go away, because they take a slight second to fade. This is another interesting method for relaying a signal up and down. We have, as I'm sure you can guess from the wool and the water sounds, skulk detectors, which are spaced far enough apart, there's another one in the middle here and another one at the top, that they can relay a signal. And this is, again, slightly different. Both of these are slightly different in Java versus Bedrock. We'll talk about the differences in a moment. But if I press this button, we relay a signal up, and then there's a slight delay before you can press again, and then we relay a signal up, and it turns on. So this can send a signal up or down, and for this, instead of using note blocks, I used trapdoors, and it sends a signal down. Perfectly fine. Another way that you can send a signal up or down is with slime blocks. And you gain about a tick of delay every 12 blocks, which isn't terrible. And all we have here is a sticky piston connected to 11 slime blocks and 1 redstone block, and then another sticky piston a block away, so when this raises, it powers this, and then sends the signal up another 11 into a redstone block. You have to have an immovable block here so it doesn't accidentally get picked up by this, and then a repeater at the top that's just taking power and applying it, and we're using a redstone lamp so that it's a on-off function. You can do the same thing, sending signal downwards, with a key note here for Java Edition, which is that because of the way that block updates and pseudo-connectivity work, quasi-connectivity, this does not work. So we have to offset slightly and put a redstone dust here, but as long as we stagger these apart 1 block, we can send infinitely up and down. So that's off. We hit this, and it's on. Easy peasy. So let's see how these all work in Bedrock Edition. Oh, and one more just special mention is you can use a dropper or dispenser and some cobwebs to get a delayed drop if you know how much time you need to delay, and then whatever activator you want at the bottom. So once that falls through, which will take a moment, it should cycle and activate this in just a moment. And this is particularly useful if you want to have a delayed activation, but it's worth noting that unless you have a way to collect the items at the bottom, this will wait 5 minutes before it can be activated again, because you have to wait for the item to despawn. So, let's take a look at these in Bedrock and note some key differences. Alright, welcome back to Bedrock. So, let's pick up in exactly the same spot. So we have our walls, and importantly, we cannot send a signal up. As you can see, we get our wall columns here, but not above. So this works exactly the same, other than a tick of delay for each block we move. And with a higher height, you can kind of see that a little more clearly. Our next option, using the zigzagged redstone on half slabs, works exactly the same. The only difference in this world is that I'm using a copper bulb and a button instead of a lever, but that's just to demonstrate that it does work either way, and you get about a tick of delay for every 15 blocks of upward movement. From there, let's talk about our water column block swapper. So this block swapper is exactly the same design as we used in Java, so let's just take a quick look at it. We have a piston, or a sticky piston, with our soul sand, and a sticky piston with another block. We have another sticky piston pointing down with a redstone block. This redstone block is activating, currently, this redstone line, which is powering into this, which is then activating this redstone line, which is activating our piston. Wow. Now, when we swap the system by powering this block next to that sticky piston, our redstone block gets pushed downwards, powers this repeater, and activates this block, which activates this piston. And you see, we get a really nice, clean block swap. So, there's one key difference between this build in Bedrock and Java, which is, like many of the others, we get extra delay traveling up. And it seems like the delay we saw in Java is the delay per block we get here. So rather than being 4-tick-ish delay all the way up, it's 4 ticks per space we move, and then 1 tick per space we move. Other than that, this works exactly the same. You could build this from Bedrock all the way to this build limit, and it would work all the way. Just like our scaffolding, which works exactly the same in both versions. Fortunately, it's just 1 tick of delay all the way up, 1 tick of delay all the way up. Our sculk also works exactly the same. And to keep the sculk quiet, you just waterlog it. For both of these, I used our trapdoors, just because they're relatively quiet, and I must have forgotten to waterlog the one in the middle. But this works exactly the same in both versions. Unfortunately, Leafstone, which we talked about previously, does not work at all in Bedrock. We get no block updates through leaves when we connect them to a log. So that's just a straight no-go in Bedrock. Then we've got our vertical redstone with sticky pistons and slime blocks. This does work almost exactly the same. The one key difference is that because we don't have quasi-connectivity in Bedrock, you can put this directly above without any issues. But we can send a signal down, and we can send a signal up. So, that's the key differences between these vertical signal methods in Bedrock and Java. But slime is a little bit expensive. It's kind of hard to build a slime farm early game. So, we're going to talk about bee farms in both versions and how you can throw together a pretty easy bee farm, because honey blocks work exactly the same for this. So, I'll see you back in Java to talk about that. Alright, now that we are back in Java, let's talk about bee farms. Oop, throw a redstone block apparently. This is kind of my default if I'm building a small bee farm, and we'll talk about why this may be more efficient for you in a moment, but let's talk about the mechanics of how and why this works. We have bees in here that get released, that gather pollen, that return, and when they return, when they bring pollen back in, there is a honey counter in here that slowly increases in strength, up to a maximum of a signal strength of 5. When that signal hits a signal strength of 5, we are using this comparator to only allow an output to a signal strength of 5 or greater, because this is a greater than or equal to signal comparator, taking a signal strength of 5 into the side. So once this hits 5, it is allowed to turn on, and when it turns on, it activates this redstone cross, which powers this block, which powers this dispenser, which we've put both glass bottles and shears into, because it doesn't really matter, you could use either or, and you'll get the same result. Once that activates, like it just did, the If you use shears, it will produce honeycomb. If you use bottles, it will produce honey bottles. They will be picked up by this hopper and run into this storage chest, where we have honey bottles and honeycomb. But what if you want to have more than one next to each other? Well, that's where we use a tileable design like this. So this functions exactly the same as our item filters. So let's talk about what's happening here. We know that a hive box, when full, will put out a maximum signal strength of 5 and never more than that. So if we go from the center one and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will activate this repeater. But for it to activate that repeater or this repeater, it would have to put out a signal strength of 6. We know that that's impossible because of the way these hivebox work. They will only ever put out a signal strength of 5. So you'll never get crosstalk between these lines. They will only ever activate their own line. Like that. So the repeater is turning this torch off, which turns this torch on, meaning that this repeater and this torch will always be in the same signal state. So what we're doing is, to prevent crosstalk between these upper lines, we are taking the signal through this block into this redstone line here, and we are traveling across to this line here. And these lines power, in this case, the block next to the dispenser to activate the dispenser, and in this case, the block above the dispenser to activate the dispenser. So you can get on top of this farm and relatively easily fill all of these dispensers as they empty. And you'll see we have neat storage of our items filtered directly down. This works a little bit differently in Bedrock. So let's talk about the key differences over there. All right, welcome back. And as you can see, our bee farm here is mostly the same, but there are a couple key caveats, a couple key differences we should talk about. First off, we have to swap out our grass blocks for mud blocks. These have to be mud. And that is because in Bedrock, when you use a dispenser on a hive, it doesn't immediately pass items into a hopper below. It ejects the items out. And so by putting blocks behind the hive box and the dispenser, we're able to force the items forward. So there is a chance that items will eject into this space, but we need to have this open to access the dispenser to refill it. You may be able to get away with putting a stair block facing this way so that you have a sliver to get into it, or maybe a half slab, but we do have to have access. The other option would be to just put a block here and then break it when you need to refill the system. That's a perfectly valid option as well. That said, the rest of this works exactly the same. You can use a comparator to read an output through a block, so we just do the exact same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then our set of repeaters, so we can never activate, just like that, the other lines. And then we go into a torch, into another torch, so that our bottom repeater and our torch up top are the same state. And we're running our signals the same way. Down below, into the side, and up above into the block over our dispensers. So because the items get ejected out of the hive and out of the dispenser, there is a chance that they will kind of shoot sideways. So you'll notice if we look in our storage here, it's not quite as clean. We have honey bottles and honeycomb kind of mixing. This only has honeycomb in it. The bottles seem to shoot pretty reliably forward, but the honeycomb, because we get more than one, seems to spread a little bit. So this fully works. You just have to make a few key modifications, like using our mud blocks and blocking the back to prevent items from popping out here. That said, once you do that, this is perfectly reliable. If you wanted to have a cleaner storage output, you could absolutely build item filters like this onto the system. And you could also run it into crafters if you wanted to, which is probably what we're going to be talking about in the next episode. Building auto crafters and a little bit of factorization. But for now, and it's a little weird to be ending one of these in Bedrock, but for now, that's all I've got time for this time. So, thanks so much for coming along on the adventure, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.